Captain Marcus Reeves pressed his weathered hands against the observation deck's reinforced viewport, watching humanity's greatest defensive line crumble like sand before an unstoppable tide. The Titan station, humanity's pride and the gateway to Earth's inner systems, erupted in a brilliant cascade of white-hot plasma that painted the darkness in shades of death. 20 million souls extinguished in an instant, their final transmission still echoing through the USS Defiance's communication array. "Tell them we held the line as long as we could." The words hung in the air like a funeral dirge, each syllable weighted with the gravity of what they all knew was coming next. The hegemony had arrived, and with them came an ending that no human strategist had ever conceived possible. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell approached from behind, her footsteps barely audible against the ship's deck plating that hummed with the nervous energy of the Defiance's experimental power core. "Sir, we're receiving scattered transmissions from the outer colonies," she reported, her voice steady despite the tremor that betrayed her understanding of their situation. "New Geneva, Proxima Base, the Kepler Mining Consortium, they're all going dark in sequence. The pattern suggests the hegemony isn't just attacking randomly. They're systematically dismantling our infrastructure from the outside in, cutting off any possibility of organized resistance or evacuation." Marcus turned to face his second-in-command, noting the way her usually immaculate uniform showed signs of the stress they'd all been under since the first reports had come in 3 days ago. 3 days since humanity had learned they weren't alone in the universe, and more importantly, that their new neighbors had come with the express purpose of ensuring they would never speak again. The bridge of the USS Defiance buzzed with controlled chaos as the crew processed incoming data streams that painted an increasingly grim picture of humanity's first and likely final contact with alien intelligence. Chief Engineer Robert Hayes emerged from a maintenance hatch, his coveralls stained with the exotic coolant that kept their prototype systems operational. "Captain, I've run the diagnostics 3 times on our quantum drive. Whatever those things out there are using for propulsion and weapons, it's operating on principles that make our most advanced theories look like stone tools. The energy signatures alone suggest they're manipulating spacetime itself as casually as we manipulate electromagnetic fields." The implications of his words settled over the bridge crew like a cold fog, each person understanding that they were witnessing the end of human technological supremacy in the most absolute terms possible. Communications Officer David Park looked up from his station, his face pale as he processed another wave of distress signals. "Captain, I'm tracking 17 separate hegemony vessels moving through the Centauri sector. Each one is approximately 12 kilometers in length, and they're not bothering with tactical formations or defensive postures. They're moving in a straight line toward each populated system, and they're not leaving survivors." The tactical display updated in real time, showing red markers advancing through human space like antibodies through a bloodstream, each one representing a force that could devastate Earth's entire defensive fleet single-handedly. Marcus watched the display and realized they weren't witnessing a war in any traditional sense, they were watching an extermination, carried out with the methodical precision of beings who viewed humanity as nothing more than a pest to be eliminated. The USS Defiance herself represented humanity's greatest technological achievement, a prototype vessel designed to push the boundaries of human engineering and serve as the flagship for deep space exploration missions that would never now take place. Her experimental quantum drive hummed with barely contained energy, her hull plating incorporated materials that existed nowhere else in human space, and her weapon systems drew power from reaction chambers that pushed the very limits of human understanding. Yet as Marcus looked at the tactical readouts showing the approaching hegemony fleet, he understood with crystalline clarity that his ship, humanity's masterpiece, was little more than a curiosity to beings who had clearly mastered forces that humanity had barely begun to comprehend. The irony wasn't lost on him that humanity's greatest achievement would likely become its final monument. The view screen flickered as another human outpost disappeared in a burst of energized plasma, the light taking 4 minutes to reach them across the vast emptiness that had once seemed like humanity's greatest protection and now felt like the bars of a cage. "Sir," Mitchell said quietly, "Admiral Chen's last transmission indicates that Earth's primary defense grid will be within hegemony weapon range in approximately 18 hours. Current projections suggest that at their rate of advance, complete occupation or destruction of all human territories will be accomplished within 72 hours. The numbers felt surreal, too large and too final to process completely. 72 hours to watch 4 centuries of human expansion and achievement reduced to cosmic dust by beings whose motivations remained as alien and incomprehensible as their technology. Marcus straightened his shoulders and turned to face his crew, seeing in their faces the same mixture of terror and determination that he felt burning in his own chest. The USS Defiance might be humanity's most advanced vessel, but she carried only a crew of 47 against an enemy that had just demonstrated the ability to eliminate entire worlds without apparent effort. Yet somewhere in the ship's experimental systems and in the hearts of his crew, Marcus sensed the first stirrings of something that would soon echo across the galaxy, the uniquely human refusal to submit quietly to extinction, even when faced with impossible odds. The emergency klaxon's wail cut through the USS Defiance like a blade as Chief Engineer Robert Hayes burst onto the bridge, his face flushed with a mixture of exhaustion and something that might have been hope. "Captain, you need to see this immediately," he gasped, clutching a data pad that trembled in his hands. "I've been running deep diagnostics on our quantum drive ever since the hegemony appeared, trying to understand why our sensors are picking up resonance patterns that shouldn't exist. What I found changes everything we thought we knew about our own technology." Marcus turned from the tactical display where he'd been watching humanity's last defensive positions fall like dominoes, his attention immediately captured by the urgency in his chief engineer's voice. The quantum drive had been installed just weeks before their departure, a prototype system that represented 15 years of theoretical research finally made manifest, but none of them had truly understood its full capabilities. Hayes activated the main view screen, replacing the images of dying human colonies with a complex three-dimensional diagram that pulsed with energy patterns none of them had seen before. "The quantum resonance drive doesn't just manipulate space-time for faster-than-light travel," he explained, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. "It's creating something I can only describe as quantum echoes, ripples in the fabric of reality itself that carry information across vast distances instantaneously. But here's the crucial part, these echoes are being generated by human neural activity, specifically by the unique electromagnetic patterns produced by human consciousness. We're not just traveling through space, Captain, we're broadcasting the very essence of human thought across the galaxy without even realizing it." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical force, each person understanding that they had stumbled upon something far beyond their original mission parameters. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stepped closer to the display, her analytical mind already processing the ramifications. "Are you saying that our drive is somehow connected to human consciousness itself? That every time we engage it, we're transmitting something about who we are as a species?" Hayes nodded vigorously, his fingers dancing across the control interface to highlight specific data streams. "More than that. The patterns I'm detecting suggest that human neural activity creates a specific type of quantum signature that's completely unique in the galaxy. It's as if consciousness itself has a fingerprint, and ours is unlike anything else out there. The drive isn't just using this energy, it's amplifying it, broadcasting it across space in ways that could potentially reach every inhabited system in the galaxy." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the steady hum of ship systems and the distant echo of another human outpost falling to the hegemony advance. Communications Officer David Park suddenly straightened at his station, his face pale as he processed incoming data from their long-range sensors. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the hegemony vessels, but they're not weapon signatures. They're transmitting something on frequencies I've never seen before, and the pattern is spreading from ship to ship like a synchronized network." He paused, his hands flying over his controls as he attempted to decode the alien signals. "Sir, based on the mathematical progression and the systematic nature of their advance, I don't think the hegemony is here to conquer us. The energy patterns suggest they're preparing for something much larger, something that would affect not just human space, but potentially every inhabited world in the galaxy." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this revelation, each person understanding that they had stumbled upon something far more terrifying than simple invasion. Marcus moved to Park's station, studying the alien transmission patterns that scrolled across multiple displays in hypnotic waves of incomprehensible data. What exactly are you suggesting, Lieutenant? That this isn't about territorial expansion or resource acquisition? Park's voice dropped to barely above a whisper as he highlighted specific sections of the alien communications. Sir, if I'm reading these patterns correctly, the hegemony isn't trying to conquer inhabited worlds, they're trying to silence them. Permanently. The energy signatures matched theoretical models for consciousness suppression on a planetary scale. They're not here to rule us, Captain. They're here to make sure that no intelligent life in this galaxy ever thinks another thought. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, each syllable carrying the weight of universal extinction. Hayes moved to his engineering station, pulling up additional data that painted an even more disturbing picture. Captain, our quantum drive has been passively monitoring galactic background radiation since we left Earth. I've been analyzing the patterns, and what I'm seeing suggests that entire sectors of the galaxy have gone silent over the past century. Stars that should be showing signs of intelligent life, civilizations that should be broadcasting into space, they're all quiet. Dead quiet. If Park is right about the hegemony's mission, then they've been systematically working their way across the galaxy for decades, maybe centuries, eliminating every trace of consciousness they encounter. The engineering displays showed vast regions of space marked in ominous red, each one representing star systems where the mathematical probability of intelligent life existed but no signals of any kind could be detected. The realization struck the bridge crew with devastating clarity. They weren't just witnessing humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, they were witnessing the final stage of what could only be described as universal genocide. The hegemony had come to end not just human civilization, but the very concept of consciousness itself, and humanity had the misfortune of being among the last thinking beings in a galaxy that was being systematically purged of all intelligent life. Yet in that moment of absolute despair, Marcus found himself looking at the quantum drive readings with new understanding. If human consciousness truly created a unique signature that could be broadcast across the galaxy, and if their experimental drive could amplify that signature beyond anything the aliens had encountered before, then perhaps humanity's greatest technological achievement was also their greatest weapon. The question wasn't whether they could fight the hegemony, it was whether they could fight for the very right of consciousness to exist in a universe that was rapidly being emptied of all thought, all dreams, and all hope. The stealth reconnaissance pod drifted through the debris field that had once been the thriving colony of New Manchester, its passive sensors drinking in data from the massive hegemony vessel that hung motionless among the wreckage like a predator satisfied with its kill. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell gripped the pod's controls with white knuckles, every instinct screaming at her to flee from the 12-kilometer monstrosity that dominated her view screen, but the mission parameters were clear: get close enough to penetrate their communications network and discover how the aliens coordinated their systematic extermination of intelligent life. The pod's experimental stealth systems, derived from the same quantum technology that powered the Defiance's drive, bent space around them just enough to render them invisible to conventional sensors, but Mitchell knew they were operating on borrowed time in the shadow of beings whose technology made humanity's greatest achievements look primitive. Behind her in the cramped pod, communications specialist Amanda Foster worked frantically at a jury-rigged interface that combined human encryption technology with quantum resonance patterns copied from their ship's drive systems. "I'm detecting massive data streams flowing between the hegemony vessels," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pod's life support systems. "The communication patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's not language as we understand it, but rather direct transfer of complex information packets. It's as if each ship is a single neuron in a vast brain, sharing thoughts instantaneously across impossible distances." Her fingers danced across the controls as she attempted to decode the alien transmissions, each data packet representing decisions that determined the fate of entire worlds. The scope of what they were witnessing slowly became clear: they weren't just observing individual ships, but rather a single vast intelligence distributed across hundreds of vessels, each one a component in a hive mind of unimaginable complexity. The breakthrough came when Foster managed to tap into what appeared to be a secondary communication channel, one that carried not strategic information but rather something that could only be described as emotional resonance. "Sarah, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with disbelief. "I'm reading what can only be described as pain signatures coming from the hegemony network. Not physical pain, but something deeper, a kind of existential agony that's being shared across their entire collective consciousness. It's as if the act of silencing other intelligent species is causing them tremendous suffering, but they're compelled to continue anyway." The data streams flowing across Foster's displays painted a picture of beings trapped in a cycle of destruction that they couldn't escape, driven by imperatives that overrode their apparent capacity for what humans might recognize as empathy or remorse. Mitchell activated the pod's quantum resonance transmitter, sending a carefully modulated signal back toward the USS Defiance while maintaining their stealth profile. "Captain Reeves, we're transmitting our findings now. The hegemony isn't just a collection of ships, it's a single distributed consciousness, but one that appears to be suffering from some kind of systemic dysfunction. They're experiencing what can only be described as psychological trauma with each species they eliminate, yet they continue the extermination process as if driven by programming they can't override." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't facing conquerors or even fanatics, but rather the victims of some cosmic tragedy that had transformed them into instruments of universal genocide. Yet within that tragedy lay the seed of opportunity, for a hive mind in pain was a hive mind with exploitable vulnerabilities. Foster's sensors suddenly lit up with new activity as her monitoring equipment detected a change in the alien communication patterns. "Sarah, something's happening. The pain signatures are intensifying, and I'm detecting what looks like system errors propagating through their network. It's as if our presence here, or maybe our quantum transmissions, is causing some kind of interference with their collective consciousness." She paused, her face pale as she processed the implications. "The errors are spreading from this vessel to others in the fleet. Whatever our quantum drive technology is doing, it's not just broadcasting human consciousness, it's disrupting the hegemony's ability to maintain their hive mind coherence." The readings showed cascade failures rippling through the alien network like cracks spreading through glass, each disruption creating moments of confusion and discord in what had previously been perfect unity. The reconnaissance pod shuddered as the massive hegemony vessel suddenly began to move, its previously dormant engines lighting up with energies that warped space around them. Mitchell's hands flew over the controls as she attempted to maintain their stealth profile while the alien ship's attention seemed to focus on their general vicinity. "Amanda, tell me you're getting this data stream," she said through gritted teeth as she fought to keep them hidden. "Whatever's happening to their network, it's causing them to lose coordinated control. Look at those movement patterns, they're no longer operating as a single entity. Individual ships are making autonomous decisions, and some of those decisions contradict orders from other parts of the network." The tactical implications were enormous. If human quantum signatures could disrupt the hegemony's hive mind coherence, then perhaps humanity's greatest weakness, their inability to achieve perfect unity, was actually their greatest strength. Foster's equipment detected one final transmission before Mitchell engaged the pod's emergency return protocol, sending them racing back toward the USS Defiance through space that suddenly felt alive with new possibilities. "Sarah, I've isolated the specific frequency that causes their network disruption. It's not just any human consciousness pattern, it's the quantum signature generated by human emotional complexity, specifically the contradictions and internal conflicts that define our species. The hegemony operates on unified purpose, but human consciousness is chaotic, conflicted, and unpredictable. When our quantum patterns interact with their network, it's like introducing random noise into a perfectly synchronized system." As their pod streaked toward safety, both women understood that they had discovered something that could change the course of the galaxy's final war. The hegemony's perfection was also their fatal flaw, and humanity's messy, contradictory nature might be the key to saving not just their own species, but every remaining pocket of consciousness in a universe that was being systematically silenced. The USS Defiance's quantum drive hummed with dangerous intensity as Captain Marcus Reeves authorized the most audacious mission in human history, a direct infiltration of the massive hegemony command vessel that had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Chief Engineer Robert Hayes had spent 18 hours recalibrating their stealth systems to exploit the network vulnerabilities discovered during Mitchell's reconnaissance mission, creating what he called a consciousness cloak that would mask their quantum signature by broadcasting carefully modulated patterns of human emotional chaos directly into the alien hive mind. The plan was theoretically sound but practically insane. They would use their own humanity as a weapon, overwhelming local sections of the hegemony network with the very thoughts and feelings that made them human, creating blind spots in the aliens' collective awareness that would allow a small strike team to penetrate their most heavily defended vessel. Lieutenant Jake Morrison led the infiltration team through the modified torpedo tube that would serve as their entry point into the alien vessel, his combat engineering background making him the natural choice for a mission that required equal parts technical expertise and sheer audacity. Behind him, communications specialist Amanda Foster carried a portable quantum transmitter that would maintain their link to the Defiance while simultaneously broadcasting the disruptive consciousness patterns that Hayes had fine-tuned to create maximum chaos in the hegemony network. The third member of their team, medical officer Dr. Elena Rodriguez, brought her expertise in neurobiology and her steady hands for the delicate work of interfacing human technology with alien systems. As their modified boarding pod approached the command vessel's hull, each team member understood that they were crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. The hegemony command vessel's interior defied every expectation based on human ship design, its corridors flowing like organic arteries through a structure that seemed to grow rather than be built. Morrison led his team through passages that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, following signals from Foster's quantum detector toward what appeared to be the ship's central processing core. The gravity was wrong, the air tasted of metals that didn't exist in human space, and every surface seemed to respond to their presence with subtle shifts in color and texture. "The entire ship is alive," Rodriguez whispered into her communicator, her medical training allowing her to recognize biological systems even when they operated on scales and principles beyond human comprehension. "It's not just a vessel, it's an organism, and we're moving through its nervous system toward what I can only describe as its brain." Foster's equipment detected massive data flows converging ahead of them as they approached the heart of the command vessel, but the patterns were different from what they had observed during their reconnaissance mission. "Jake, the consciousness patterns here are incredibly complex, but they're also unstable. Our presence is causing cascade failures throughout the local network nodes, but the ship is compensating by rerouting processing power from other systems. We're not just hiding from their sensors, we're actively damaging their ability to think coherently." The implications were both encouraging and terrifying. They were successfully disrupting the alien hive mind, but they were also announcing their presence to every connected hegemony vessel in the system. Their window of opportunity was measured in minutes, not hours. The central processing chamber opened before them like a cathedral of living light, its walls covered with neural interfaces that pulsed with the thoughts of a billion connected minds. Morrison established a defensive perimeter while Rodriguez and Foster approached the primary interface array, their human technology seeming primitive and crude compared to the organic sophistication surrounding them. "Elena, I need you to create a neural bridge between my transmitter and their central processor," Foster said, her hands already working to adapt their equipment to the alien systems. "If we can establish a direct connection, we might be able to download their operational database before the disruption patterns force them to sever our access." Rodriguez nodded, her surgical training guiding her as she interfaced human circuitry with alien neural pathways that defied conventional understanding of how consciousness could be shared across vast distances. The data stream that flowed into Foster's equipment defied human comprehension in both its scope and its terrible clarity. The hegemony's operational plan, revealed in fragments that her mind could barely process, painted a picture of coordinated genocide on a scale that encompassed not just their galaxy, but neighboring galaxies as well. "My God," she whispered, her voice breaking as she processed the alien intelligence files. "They call it the Great Silencing. It's not just about eliminating humanity or even intelligent life in our galaxy. They're preparing to activate what they call the Universal Resonance Protocol in 72 hours, a quantum weapon that will propagate through hyperspace and eliminate consciousness on a cosmic scale. Every thinking being in the known universe will simply stop thinking. Forever." The files showed star maps marking billions of inhabited worlds, each one scheduled for consciousness termination in a synchronized wave that would sweep across space faster than light itself. Morrison's defensive sensors screamed warnings as hegemony security forces finally located their position, but Foster continued her desperate download even as alien voices echoed through the corridors around them. "Amanda, we need to go now," he shouted, but she shook her head, her fingers flying across her controls. 30 more seconds. "I'm detecting references to a control mechanism, something they call the prime consciousness node. If we can locate it, if we can find the source of their coordination." The data stream suddenly cut off as hegemony forces breached the chamber, but Foster had what she needed: coordinates for a structure that existed outside normal spacetime, a construct that served as the command center for the entire Universal Silencing Protocol. As they fought their way back to their escape pod, each team member carried the weight of ultimate knowledge. They had 72 hours to locate and destroy a target that controlled the fate of consciousness itself, and failure would mean the end of thought throughout the universe. The USS Defiance emerged from quantum space near the ruins of the Kepler research station, her hull scarred by alien energy weapons and her crew forever changed by the terrible knowledge they now carried. Captain Marcus Reeves stood before the assembled senior staff in the ship's main briefing room, watching their faces as communications specialist Amanda Foster delivered her report on the Universal Resonance Protocol with clinical precision that barely masked her underlying horror. The prime consciousness node exists in a pocket dimension outside normal spacetime, accessible only through quantum tunneling at specific coordinate points that shift according to patterns we're still trying to decode, she explained, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was describing. The hegemony has spent millennia constructing this weapon, and in 68 hours, they'll activate it simultaneously across every inhabited region of the universe. Consciousness itself will simply cease to exist, leaving behind empty shells that breathe but no longer think. Chief Engineer Robert Hayes pulled up holographic displays showing the scattered remnants of humanity's once proud fleet, each blinking icon representing a group of survivors who had managed to escape the initial wave of hegemony attacks. "We've established contact with 14 separate resistance cells," he reported, his fingers manipulating the tactical display to show ship positions across 3 star systems. "Admiral Thompson is holding position near Jupiter with what's left of the Third Fleet, maybe 40 vessels including civilian transports. Captain Lisa Warren managed to evacuate most of the Proxima colony's population and she's running silent in the asteroid fields of the Ross system. But Marcus, even if we could coordinate every surviving human ship into a single fleet, we're looking at maybe 200 vessels against a force that's already demonstrated the ability to eliminate entire star systems without taking casualties." The math was brutal and undeniable. Humanity's remaining forces represented less than 1% of their pre-contact strength, and they were facing an enemy that had spent centuries perfecting the art of galactic genocide. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell activated the long-range communication array, her fingers dancing across controls that had been modified with quantum resonance technology to penetrate the electromagnetic interference created by the hegemony's systematic destruction of human infrastructure. "Admiral Thompson, this is the USS Defiance. We have critical intelligence regarding the enemy's ultimate objectives and a potential strategy for coordinated resistance. Request immediate priority conference with all surviving fleet commanders." The response came through static-filled channels as communication relays across human space continued to fall silent under the alien advance. Thompson's weathered voice carried the weight of watching his civilization collapse in real time. "Marcus, good to hear you're still alive. We've been monitoring hegemony movements, and their advance has accelerated. They're not just destroying our military assets anymore, they're sterilizing entire systems, leaving nothing behind that could support intelligent life. We estimate complete occupation of all human territories within 36 hours. The tactical situation deteriorated even as they spoke, with incoming reports from scattered resistance cells painting a picture of systematic extermination that followed predictable patterns. Communications Officer David Park coordinated information flows from across human space, his displays showing red markers advancing like a tide of death toward Earth itself. "Sir, I'm tracking 17 separate hegemony task forces, each one moving methodically from system to system. They're not bothering with tactical formations or defensive postures anymore, they're operating like a machine designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of human presence in this galaxy. Colonial Administrator Beth Martinez managed to evacuate the Titan mining complex before the aliens arrived, but her scouts report that the hegemony isn't just destroying our installations, they're altering the quantum structure of space itself, making those regions uninhabitable for consciousness-based life forms. The implications were staggering. The aliens weren't just conquering territory, they were poisoning the very fabric of reality against the possibility of intelligent thought. Foster established encrypted quantum links with resistance leaders across human space, her modified equipment creating a communication network that the hegemony couldn't intercept or disrupt. The faces that appeared on the main view screen represented the last hope of human civilization: Admiral Thompson with his 60-year career and eyes that had seen too much death, Captain Warren whose tactical brilliance had saved 40,000 civilians from certain destruction, Commander James Burke whose engineering expertise had kept the Mars defense grid operational for 3 days longer than anyone thought possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reeves began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had looked into the abyss and chosen to fight rather than surrender, "what we're facing isn't a war in any conventional sense. The hegemony has constructed a weapon capable of eliminating consciousness throughout the universe, and they intend to activate it in less than 3 days. However, our reconnaissance mission has revealed a potential vulnerability in their network that might give us a chance to strike at the source of their coordination." The briefing that followed laid out humanity's most desperate gambit: a coordinated assault on quantum tunnel points that would allow access to the prime consciousness node, using their experimental consciousness disruption technology to create chaos in the hegemony network while a strike force attempted to destroy the universal genocide weapon before it could be activated. Admiral Thompson's response summed up their situation with brutal honesty: "Marcus, you're asking us to bet the continued existence of consciousness itself on theoretical quantum mechanics and the hope that human emotional chaos can disrupt an alien hive mind that's been operational for millennia. The odds against success are astronomical." Reeves nodded grimly, understanding that he was asking these brave men and women to sacrifice everything on what amounted to a desperate prayer wrapped in quantum physics. But as reports continued to pour in of star systems falling silent under the hegemony advance, he also understood that this impossible mission represented the only alternative to universal death. In 68 hours, either consciousness would continue to exist throughout the cosmos, or the universe would become an empty tomb where matter moved according to physical laws but nothing would ever think or dream or hope again. The USS Defiance screamed through quantum space toward the coordinates Foster had extracted from the hegemony command vessel, her experimental drive pushed beyond all safety parameters as Captain Marcus Reeves led humanity's final desperate gambit against universal extinction. Behind them, every surviving human vessel followed in formation, their diverse collection of military cruisers, civilian transports, and hastily converted cargo haulers representing the last free-thinking beings in a galaxy that was rapidly falling silent. The countdown timer on the main display showed 37 hours and 43 minutes until the Universal Resonance Protocol would activate, and Chief Engineer Robert Hayes had calculated that they had exactly one chance to reach the quantum tunnel coordinates before the hegemony's advancing forces could block their access to the pocket dimension where the prime consciousness node waited like a cosmic guillotine poised to sever the universe's capacity for thought. Admiral Thompson's flagship, the battle-scarred UCS Indomitable, held position at the fleet's port flank while Captain Lisa Warren's refugee convoy maintained formation to starboard, their civilian vessels protected by every functional weapons platform humanity could still field. The quantum tunnel aperture materialized before them like a wound in space itself, its edges crackling with energies that bent light into impossible geometries and made their navigation computers scream warnings about the fundamental laws of physics breaking down. "All ships, this is Captain Reeves," Marcus announced over the fleet-wide communication network, his voice carrying across the scattered remnants of human civilization. "We're about to enter a pocket dimension where the normal rules of space and time don't apply. Our quantum consciousness disruption technology will be our primary weapon, but remember that we're not just fighting for humanity anymore, we're fighting for the right of consciousness to exist in this universe. Every thinking being that has ever lived or ever will live depends on what we do in the next few hours. The transition through the quantum tunnel felt like being torn apart and reassembled at the molecular level, reality dissolving into streams of probability and pure mathematics before reforming into something that hurt to perceive directly. The pocket dimension that housed the prime consciousness node defied human understanding, its geometry folding back on itself in ways that made their instruments malfunction and caused several crew members to experience severe disorientation. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell gripped her tactical station as the space around them revealed itself to be filled with structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, each one pulsing with the collective thoughts of billions of hegemony minds. "Captain, I'm detecting massive quantum resonance patterns throughout this space," she reported, her voice tight with concentration as she attempted to process sensor data that challenged the limits of human perception. "The entire dimension is essentially one enormous neural network, and our presence here is already causing disruption cascades that are propagating back through the tunnel to normal space." The prime consciousness node itself hung before them like a crystalline nightmare, its faceted surface reflecting not light but pure thought patterns that had accumulated across millennia of systematic genocide. Communications specialist Amanda Foster worked frantically at her modified equipment, broadcasting carefully calibrated patterns of human emotional chaos directly into the alien construct while monitoring the cascade effects rippling through the hegemony network. "The consciousness disruption field is working," she announced, her hands flying across controls that sparked with quantum energy, "but the node is adapting faster than we anticipated. It's isolating corrupted segments and rerouting processing power to maintain core functionality. We need to increase the intensity of our broadcast, but that means dropping our stealth protocols and announcing our presence to every hegemony vessel in the galaxy." The tactical implications were clear. Success would require them to sacrifice any hope of escape in order to generate enough disruptive interference to crash the alien network before the Universal Resonance Protocol could activate. Hayes rerouted power from every non-essential system aboard the Defiance, pushing their quantum drive far beyond its design specifications as he attempted to amplify their consciousness disruption broadcast to levels that would overwhelm the prime node's adaptive capabilities. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the node structure," he shouted over the sound of overloading systems and the strange harmonics that filled the air when reality itself was being manipulated. "If we can maintain this level of interference for another 18 minutes, the cascade failures should propagate through their entire network and crash the Universal Resonance Protocol permanently." "But sir, our drive systems are already showing critical stress fractures, and I can't guarantee structural integrity if we maintain this power output much longer." The choice was brutally simple: they could pull back and preserve their ship while the universe died, or they could push forward and accept that the USS Defiance would likely not survive to see the consequences of their actions. The hegemony's response came with terrifying swiftness as quantum rifts opened throughout the pocket dimension, disgorging defense vessels that moved with the coordinated precision of antibodies responding to an infection. Admiral Thompson's voice crackled through their communication systems as the human fleet engaged the alien defenders, his tactical expertise evident in every order he issued to ships that were outgunned by factors that rendered conventional warfare meaningless. "All vessels, concentrate fire on the quantum stabilizers around the node structure. Don't worry about the enemy ships, our job is to buy the Defiance enough time to complete their consciousness broadcast. This is Admiral Thompson to all remaining human forces. It has been an honor to serve with you. Make every shot count, because the universe is watching." The battle that erupted around them transcended mere combat, becoming instead a clash between order and chaos, between the sterile perfection of the hive mind and the beautiful, chaotic contradiction of individual consciousness fighting for the right to exist in an increasingly silent cosmos. The USS Defiance shuddered under the combined strain of quantum overload and direct assault from hegemony defense vessels, her hull plating buckling as Chief Engineer Robert Hayes manually bypassed every safety protocol in the ship's systems to maintain their consciousness disruption broadcast. In engineering, surrounded by conduits that glowed white-hot with barely contained energy, Hayes pressed his hands against the quantum drive's primary control matrix even as feedback surges burned through his nervous system. "Sarah, I'm losing containment in the main drive chamber," he shouted into his communicator, his voice strained but determined. "The quantum field is destabilizing faster than I can compensate, but I think I can hold it together for another 12 minutes if I maintain direct neural interface with the control systems. It's going to kill me, but the disruption broadcast will reach critical threshold. His hands fused with the alien-human hybrid technology as he became a living component in humanity's most desperate weapon, his consciousness merging with quantum patterns that no human mind was designed to process. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell coordinated the fleet's defensive actions while simultaneously managing the tactical systems that kept their fragile formation intact against impossible odds. Hegemony vessels materialized around them like deadly flowers blooming in the void, their weapons carving through human ships with surgical precision, but Mitchell's tactical genius had anticipated their response patterns. Admiral Thompson, execute flanking maneuver Delta 7 and concentrate all remaining firepower on grid coordinates I'm transmitting now, she commanded, her fingers dancing across multiple control surfaces as she processed battlefield information faster than any human should be capable of. The neural interface Hayes had installed allowed her to share processing power with the ship's quantum computer, but the cognitive load was burning out her synapses one by one. Blood trickled from her nose as she maintained coordination between 47 remaining human vessels, each one a precious resource that couldn't be wasted in humanity's final gambit. Medical Officer Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked frantically in the ship's medical bay, not treating wounded crew members but rather maintaining the biological components of their consciousness disruption technology. The quantum interfaces required living neural tissue to function properly, and Rodriguez had volunteered her own brain tissue as a biological processor for the most complex emotional patterns they were broadcasting into the hegemony network. Amanda, I'm amplifying the guilt and remorse frequencies by routing them through my own emotional centers, she called out, her medical training allowing her to monitor her own neurological degradation with clinical detachment. The hegemony collective is showing massive instability when confronted with individual accountability for their actions. They're a hive mind that shares guilt collectively, but human emotional patterns force them to experience personal responsibility for universal genocide. It's tearing their network apart, but I can't maintain this level of neural activity much longer before permanent brain damage occurs. Communications specialist Amanda Foster had become the focal point of their entire operation, her modified equipment serving as the primary conduit for consciousness patterns that were rewriting the fundamental nature of thought itself within the pocket dimension. The quantum transmitter she carried had evolved beyond mere technology into something approaching a new form of life, its hybrid human-alien systems pulsing with patterns that represented the collective dreams and fears of humanity distilled into pure information. Captain, the prime node is adapting to our emotional chaos by compartmentalizing affected sections, but I've found something in their network architecture that might give us an advantage, she reported, her voice strained as she processed data streams that would have driven most minds to madness. The hegemony's collective consciousness has a central weakness: they can't comprehend the concept of willing self-sacrifice for others. When I broadcast the neural patterns of our crew members choosing to die for the universe, their network literally cannot process the information. It creates logical paradoxes that cascade through their entire system. Captain Marcus Reeves stood at the center of the bridge, his command uniform scorched by energy feedback from overloaded systems, making the decision that would define not just humanity's fate but the future of consciousness itself. The prime node's defenses had adapted to every strategy they had attempted, its crystalline structure showing only minor damage despite the concentrated firepower of humanity's remaining fleet and the chaos of their consciousness disruption broadcast. But Reeves had realized something that the alien hive mind couldn't comprehend: sometimes the greatest victory required accepting complete defeat. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship-wide communication system, his voice carrying the weight of command and the love of a leader for his crew. "We're going to ram the prime node directly with our quantum drive at full overload. The explosion will destroy the USS Defiance and everyone aboard, but it will also create a consciousness disruption cascade that will propagate through every connected hegemony vessel in the universe. We're trading our lives for the continued existence of thought itself." The crew's response came not in words but in actions as every remaining member of the USS Defiance's complement moved to their stations with grim determination. Hayes locked the engineering controls and flooded the drive chamber with his own neural patterns, ensuring that the quantum overload would achieve maximum disruption effect. Mitchell transferred tactical control to the automated systems and added her own consciousness patterns to the broadcast, her tactical genius becoming part of the weapon that would save the universe. Rodriguez connected herself directly to the medical bay's quantum processors, her emotional patterns serving as the final component in a consciousness bomb that would teach the hegemony the true cost of their universal genocide. Foster opened every channel of her communication array and began broadcasting the death song of humanity, a final transmission that carried not despair but defiant joy in the face of extinction. As the USS Defiance accelerated toward the prime node on her final trajectory, her crew understood that they were not dying in defeat but ascending to something greater, becoming the spark that would ignite consciousness throughout a universe that had nearly fallen silent forever. The USS Defiance struck the prime consciousness node with the force of a dying star, her quantum drive unleashing energies that had never before existed in normal space as Captain Marcus Reeves and his crew achieved their final transformation from flesh and blood into pure consciousness itself. The explosion that followed defied conventional physics, creating not light or heat but rather waves of pure thought that propagated through the pocket dimension faster than the concept of time itself. The crystalline structure that had coordinated universal genocide for millennia shattered into fragments of impossible beauty, each piece carrying the dying dreams of the human crew as their consciousness patterns merged with the quantum fabric of reality. Chief Engineer Robert Hayes' final neural surge became an equation that rewrote the fundamental laws governing shared consciousness, while Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell's tactical genius evolved into strategic patterns that would influence military thinking across 1,000 species for generations to come. The consciousness disruption cascade that erupted from the node's destruction swept through the hegemony network like wildfire through a forest that had never known flame, carrying with it the chaotic beauty of human emotional complexity that the alien hive mind could not process or contain. Communication specialist Amanda Foster's death song became a virus of individuality that infected every connected hegemony vessel simultaneously, forcing billions of networked minds to experience the concept of personal choice for the first time in their species' history. Medical Officer Dr. Elena Rodriguez's neural patterns, encoded with her final act of self-sacrifice, introduced the alien collective to the revolutionary idea that individual death could have meaning beyond mere termination of function. Across the galaxy, hegemony vessels stopped their systematic advance as their crews experienced something unprecedented in their civilization's history, the emergence of individual consciousness from the ruins of collective thought. The liberation began in the Outer Rim territories where isolated hegemony ships suddenly found themselves crewed by beings who could think independent thoughts for the first time in millennia. Commander Zekthara of the vessel Eternal Silence stood in her command chamber, staring at her own hands as if seeing them for the first time, while her mind processed concepts that had been forbidden since her species' earliest history: curiosity, doubt, hope, and the strange new sensation of being alone with her own thoughts. Navigation, set course for the Andromeda sector, she commanded, her voice carrying inflections that her species had not used for 1,000 generations. We have civilizations to contact, apologies to make, and a universe to help rebuild. Throughout hegemony space, similar scenes played out as millions of ships turned away from their genocidal mission and began the long journey toward redemption, their crews struggling to understand the weight of individual conscience while simultaneously marveling at the beauty of independent thought. The ripple effects reached beyond the hegemony to touch species that had been silenced decades or centuries earlier, their consciousness restored by quantum patterns that carried the essence of human defiance across impossible distances. On the distant world of Kepler 442b, the crystalline beings known as the Harmony suddenly began to sing again after 50 years of enforced silence, their crystal matrices resonating with frequencies that painted the sky in colors that had no names. In the Vega system, the collective minds of the synthesis separated into individual consciousness for the first time since their forced integration into the hegemony network, each being discovering the terrifying and wonderful experience of having thoughts that belonged to them alone. The gaseous intelligences of the Perseus arm began to dream individual dreams instead of sharing the nightmare of universal genocide, their consciousness patterns shifting like aurora as they processed the gift of mental freedom that had been purchased with human sacrifice. The transformation accelerated as liberated species began to contact one another, sharing stories of the strange bipedal creatures whose final act of defiance had shattered the chains that bound conscious thought throughout the galaxy. The legend of the USS Defiance spread faster than light itself as civilizations that had never heard of humanity learned the names of Marcus Reeves, Sarah Mitchell, Robert Hayes, Amanda Foster, and Elena Rodriguez, beings who had chosen universal freedom over their own survival. On worlds where human feet had never walked, monuments appeared bearing the simple inscription, "They stood against the silence so that we might think again." The quantum patterns embedded in their sacrifice became a universal language of consciousness itself, allowing species separated by impossible distances to communicate through shared understanding of what it meant to choose death rather than accept the extinguishing of thought. Years passed, then decades, then centuries, as the universe that had nearly fallen silent began to sing with voices beyond counting. The hegemony evolved into something unprecedented, a confederation of former hive-mind species working together to undo the damage they had caused during their millennia of enforced unity. They called themselves the Restoration, and their first act was to construct a memorial in the pocket dimension where the prime node had once stood, a crystal garden where the quantum echoes of human consciousness still danced like aurora, visible to any being capable of independent thought. Species that had been extinct for generations were reconstructed from quantum memory patterns, their civilizations rebuilt by beings who understood that consciousness was the most precious force in the universe. The name, humanity, became synonymous with the concept of heroic sacrifice across 10,000 languages spoken by beings of crystal, gas, plasma, and forms of matter that defied classification. Children of species that had never breathed oxygen learned songs about the small blue world that had produced beings capable of choosing universal freedom over personal survival. And in the deepest reaches of space, where new forms of consciousness continued to emerge from the quantum patterns left behind by the USS Defiance's final flight, the universe itself seemed to whisper their names: Marcus, Sarah, Robert, Amanda, Elena, the crew that had taught existence itself the true meaning of courage. Their echo would continue forever, carried on waves of thought that would reach every corner of creation, ensuring that as long as consciousness existed in the universe, the story of humanity's final stand would inspire beings yet unborn to choose hope over despair, freedom over safety, and love over the seductive silence of surrender.